This does not feel like a story injected with artificial symbolism. It acts like a living, breathing narrative that grows over time alongside each of the characters present to eventually take on these horrors head on. This isn't the end-all discussion on such psychological ideals, but a fitting continuation of what to do next to overcome them. Now that is gaming with a purpose. Hey there, it's Cookies, and it's no secret Alan Wake 2 is arguably one of the most unique and awe-inspiring horror titles in recent memory. From the mind-bending puzzles within the environment, the ever-changing narrative landscape, the cast in which everyone absolutely knocks it out of the park, and the weighty gameplay. This title serves as a prominent Game of the Year contender. I've been finishing up my second playthrough, and I noticed something beyond all the subtle foreshadowing that took place. While Alan and cast may not have escaped the dark presence yet, they have avoided the spiral that engulfs countless psychological horror tropes. In a nutshell, Alan Wake understands trauma.
CJ has to bet, and he's also dumb, even though he's blind.
This story is a monster.
With that being said, it's your boy Cookies, so be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, learned something new, or dislike and describe how you feel regarding Alan Wake 2 overall. The gaming industry has had a weird cause-effect relationship when going into heavier topics such as PTSD, depression, suicide, a lot of the implications of grief and trauma. A lot of games have attempted to tackle this, but few, if any, have done it in a way that Alan Wake 2 has. In this video, I really want to take a step back, and while you can go into all the nuances of the narrative, I want to look at Alan Wake 2 strictly from a macro level, metaphorical sense, to really dive into what this game does special that, at least in my eyes, makes it one of the greatest horror games of all time. First is in the presentation of said trauma. Some of the later Silent Hill games, say like Homecoming, take issues of PTSD and amnesia and, while portraying these effectively across monster design and environments, fails to treat these real-life issues with a level of respect and continuity that they deserve from scene to gameplay. It serves as a crutch for a narrative twist, rather than a topic of discussion beyond the spark notes. The earlier Silent Hill titles had more nuance in these topics. Silent Hill 2 let the gameplay itself, combined with the environmental settings and iconic soundtrack, to nurse our minds into the trauma associated with such grayness akin to stories like Atlas Shrugged or Crime and Punishment. The game itself allowed the player to manifest their own escape from reality, but in a manner that gave us a clear mind over the cryptic story that took place. We fought through the uncertainties to experience the light.
Did you hear me? I lost my way, lost my way. I was trapped in 1,000 nights with no escape. Nightmares taking me over, and now I'm wide awake. And now I'm wide awake. Oh, I died like 1,000,000 times, but the waves I break. The nightmare's finally over, and now I'm wide awake. And now I'm wide awake.
Alan Wake 2 never falls into the trap of allowing the characters to act enslaved two narrative threads, which is ironic as that sentence itself is the central question the series asks. Alan Wake itself is focused on the idea of writing fiction and turning it into reality, the horrors that come from enslaving yourself to works of art. None other is that more apparent than Alan's wife Alice, who we see in Parliament Tower throughout the entire adventure. Her nightmares of Alan attempting to escape the dark place line up with her fascinations of photography as she works to freeze a singular moment in time from reality, calling it the dark place. Over the course of the game, she gives more of herself away slowly, transforming the apartment into a maze of cameras and videos where she works to express how she is seeing the world to others. To the point where close friends start reaching out and her mannerisms become borderline unrecognizable.
One morning, I saw a deer soar past my bedroom window. It was a balloon of some cartoon animal. And I looked out at the street below, and I saw a little girl crying. Like losing that balloon had just ended her whole world. It was the perfect image of the horror of caring. And that's when I got myself out of bed. And I picked up my camera.
This revelation over the course of the game is a slow burn that tugs at the heartstrings to anyone who has ever wanted to show the world just how they felt. Anyone that didn't want to be alone, only to then be consumed by that isolation. It's even fitting that Alan is a narrator who tries to progress a story through his own internal thoughts and mannerisms, and you see that Alice even starts to construct these various narrative exhibits in a much similar fashion. This same fate is one Alan himself experiences, trapped by his own writings until he no longer can separate the fine line between fiction and reality. Someone who, in the first game, painted himself as an action hero, but after 13 years of being trapped, having sacrificed himself so Alice could escape, now questions whether his own decisions are the right ones for himself and those around him. Then there is, of course, the duality of Alan and Thomas Zane, who really are two sides of the same coin. A tortured writer trapped in the dark place, or in some cases an auteur filmmaker contingent on your views of the story. While I won't dive extensively into each narrative beat, as a lot of this game's story bits are best saved for a first playthrough and we have plenty more to dissect with the upcoming New Game Plus, I want to highlight two moments in particular. During Alan's adventures throughout the dark place, he will run into these dark humanoid beings that a lot of the times won't even attack you. They will casually act like normal people, resting at bus stops, walking down the street, but then there are those brief moments where they flip a switch or press a clicker and start wreaking hell on you. As the game progresses further and further and Alan descends or ascends the spiral case, we see that these creatures will start getting more aggressive and duplicating into the dozens until every time you're out in the street feels like a quick sprint to your next destination in order to simply survive. They whisper in the dark such eerie beats, but ultimately that darkness and their shadows are a contrast to Alan's struggle as a writer and a person. These can represent the people Alan would see in New York, and his inability to tap into their stories for influence, only being able to manifest his own perception of reality on them. That weighted fiction giving the dark place more power over Alan, thus creating this inherent spiral from his own traumatic past in a clever way that isn't shoved in your face or made readily apparent in the story. If Alan is projecting himself onto New York in this dark place, akin to how many of us go through life, as the world around us to one degree or another can become a fabrication of what we perceive, then each of these dark shadows and the art being created itself is Alan Wake. He at a time was this dark New York City, and that type of characterization is something most psychological horror titles fail to capitalize on. I mean, just look at this cutscene between Alex Casey and Alan Wake.
Casey! You're the killer, the cult leader. It's in your eyes.
No! You've got the wrong man! It's Scratch! There's no time to lose!
You're going nowhere. Dead tired. I just wanted it to be over. It was all my fault. I'd had this dark place in my head for so long. Sometimes I'd forget the pain was there. Like it was the way you were supposed to feel. I was not in a dark place. I was the dark place. The source of it all. The vessel. Me and the writer, we were the same.
This place kept pushing me under, getting into my head, poisoning me with darkness. I had to find a way to escape before it was too late. Too late again.
Alex Casey does portray that him and Alan are the same. A lot of the thoughts that Alex Casey had, he recognizes it's because Alan wrote it, similar to Thomas Zane when he wrote into Alan's storyline. You even have to take this a step further. Imagine this, a writer who had a traumatic childhood, which we know because Thomas Zane had written it, only to then skyrocket into popularity because of the stories he would write with Alex Casey, the dark, eerie, twisted nature of how he saw the world, this self-destructive cycle of partying, drugs, aggression. The one thing that scared people closest to him was the same exact thing he kept fueling to keep the books going, to keep the stories going, to stay relevant in the world. It's the self-fulfilling cycle that he gave into because it's what he thought the world wanted, which could also be seen as why he inevitably chose to kill Alex Casey off, but that's another spiral we're not going to go into. We're going to kind of keep this back on track. We don't want to go down that spiral note, so we're going to backtrack and just go to the next beat. The discoveries of how the game interprets struggles is organic and never feels forced, making repeat playthroughs all the more necessary. And of course, we have to talk about Thomas Zane.
I drifted far, I was lost at sea. The shore was gone, it was nowhere to be seen. A diver sinking under waves where the sun's never been. To ocean green where shadows creep. And Bowie said I should wait in deep. An artist dying for his art to make you finally see.
Thomas Zane is drastically different from the first game. However, his motivations seem to be identical.
Well done. I have something important to tell you. It goes like this. For he did not know that beyond the lake he called home lies a deeper, darker ocean green, where waves are both wilder and more serene. To its ports I've been. To its ports I've been. Do you understand?
Theories aside, the sequel paints him with a Tarantino-esque flair similar to what we saw with Mr. Scratch in American Nightmare.
This is what you look like. Does that bother you? I bet it does. I'm not just wearing your face, you know. It goes a lot deeper than that. There's a lot of you and me. All the best parts. At first, I was just an idea. But they kept telling all those stories about you. You already had that rep. And then you disappeared mysteriously. And then, the stories about bad, crazy Alan Wake came true. And here I am.
We're shown the most unhinged of Zane's artistic performances, going as far as to act out his own death for the sake of Alan's safety.
You'd given up. You stopped writing. You said it was too dangerous, that we didn't deserve to get out. And then he showed up. Scratch. He promised to write. To get me the hell out of here. He was magnificent. A visionary. I mean, it was art. But then, when it finished, it took a return and left me behind.
It's still here, and so is he.
I know I fucked up. But you can still catch him before he gets out, before he gets to your wife. When you get to him, don't hesitate. Kill the bastard for what he did to us. There's a murder site in my cinema where my film Nightless Night is playing.
I told you not to try anything!
He is the definition of shackles off, but inherits a sense of remorse for how far his acts have taken him, and his inability to discern fact from fiction. As a side note, this game utilizes echoes as a mechanic and gameplay to bridge stories. You explore the world in Alan's case, looking for these echoes of ideas from other characters to carve a path forward for yourself. In some cases, there are echoes of Thomas Zane in Alan Wake, and vice versa. But let's walk that idea back for now. In the later half of the story, Zane falls for Mr. Scratch's plan as he attempts to collaborate with a force not sane for any chance of escaping. A desperate act by a mind that at one point seemed to be both a guiding light, as well as someone that was leaning more into control, no pun intended. He feels imprisoned by his views in the dark place he has been trapped within. And let's not even dive into the fact he took his art as far as to erase him and his past mistakes from existence. To head to a place even beyond the dark place, for reasons that the Alan Wake fandom will continue to debate until the end of time. There's more to his narrative arcs, but serves as a reminder of how far fiction can go if left unchecked. Speaking of unhinged acts, we have to talk about Mr. Scratch.
You have no light in sight. Just endless darkness to fight. The horror spoken comes true. I'm dark, twisted, and cruel. I'm in the rain, trickling down. I'm the sickness of this town. I'm the ants inside your walls, the quiet knocking on your door. It's not your story to write. Scratch out your words in the night. When the writer is in doubt, my turn to come out.
Mr. Scratch wears many faces, but at the end of the day, based on what your perspective is, he is the darker side of Alan. Realities where his worst fears and pain surfaces above the water. In American Nightmare, he was playing off Alan's wild side during his years with partying and various addictions, but as the story was forced into a horror, given the amount of time Alan has been trapped here, this new Scratch 2.0 is more feral and gives no fucks. I mean, my guy will just end your life in a second. The narrative twist of Alan realizing the story initiation he is writing was directly playing over the story return that Scratch was also writing is both equal parts genius as it is confusing, but let's look at this. The loop Alan finds himself in is caused by forces beyond his control. Again, no pun intended, sorry Outie. But the way he steers the ship is still entirely up to him as we see it. After he comes to a realization of Alice's death being directly tied to his own actions, moments of trying to escape the dark place.
Still he's a torchbearer, and it couldn't be much clearer. A war meets its warrior, true and right. The darkness within him held her hostage. Had he seen her drowning, would have saved her from the darkness of the lake.
But then times where he almost relishes in the absurdity of it. Like he's enjoying this play, almost in a way that Zane is. He succumbs to the dark place numerous times throughout the adventure for different reasons, just like anyone else who's going through the stages of grief and trauma. If you look at it like this, imagine being on the Monopoly board, and every time you get to the end, instead of collecting 200, you just go directly to jail. That essentially is initiation for Alan Wake. People who go through traumatic experiences find themselves in loops, where the same actions tend to occur again and again and again. We as people are creations of habit, and Alan Wake 2 brilliantly takes us through each of these stages of grief. No other game has really done before to this degree of execution. And why don't we take a quick second to dive into the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. What's brilliant about this story is, just like with identifying traumas and overcoming our past, there is essentially, it's hard to kind of pinpoint an origin point. This is where the story begins, and this is where the story ends, at least going into the New Game Plus. So depending on how you kind of perceive the story, you can use this overlay of the stages of grief and really kind of dig into each of these scenes and set pieces countless ways. I'll leave that to you because we got more stuff to talk about. We have to remember, when we find Alan on the beach for the first time, this isn't the first moment we are experiencing what he's been through. we are seeing what 13 years of the same pain has caused him. This game shows how the world decays from such hurt, but then, on the flip side, also conveys the power art has for better and for worse.
Look in the mirror, the cobweb of my soul, on my face forever, seeking to be whole. Driven by passion, raging like a storm, with thunder and lightning, and the hubris I was born. Blood-hot and vain, I risk to take it all. Blind to your pain, your wounds, my downfall. You can relight my fire when our shame becomes the pale horse.
Which bleeds into Saga's story. Over the course of the game, the story in the Dark Place begins rewriting her reality. As a player, this leaves us confused and in a state of uncertainty as we begin questioning ourselves in more ways than one. A strange state of psychosis that hangs over us like a dark, rainy cloud. A cauldron lake cloud, if you will. For anyone who goes through traumatic events, the stages of grief are perfectly sculpted within both narratives of this adventure, both Saga and Alan. The gameplay itself mirrors the struggle of a writer with light being used as a tool to fend off the darkness, also illustrating Saga's own struggles with piecing together the truth in this world. In the first game, the darkness was used more as a representation for the unknown, the spooky spookies we couldn't understand. But in the sequel, this same metaphor has manifested into an idea of fiction overtaking reality. Each character illustrating a different outcome of that. Thornton and Mulligan with trying to erase mistakes of the past only to be consumed by the dark presence. Yako and his brother with the unwillingness to accept what will be. Mr. Door with the lengths one will go to harness the power of creation for their own end game. Saga, who is fighting to hold on to what she truly believes in. And Alan, who is the sum of all of these parts. Alan Wake 2 is a glorious representation of the pain inflicted by art, but then the ability of art itself to breathe life and eradicate fears we would otherwise struggle to overcome. The game never paints anyone in a bright light outside of safe havens. But the moment-to-moment gameplay reignites our ability to push forward and make sense of this spiraling fiction around us, to not be enslaved by the fear of what could be.
No!
What's going on? Am I in the field office? No. It's the mine place. I can't leave. Why can't I leave? I can't sense anyone.
Nowhere else is this more apparent than one of the final sections you get to play as with Saga. She's trapped in her mind place, which eventually starts succumbing to the dark place, as well as her own interpretation of Mr. Scratch consuming her, the story and the narratives and the fictions consuming her life.
I let everyone down. Logan, Casey, myself. This is my fault. My daughter is dead. My partner was taken over by a monster. I'm trapped in the dark place. Powerless.
Until she steps down and, moment by moment, with the memories of those she's been with, in spite of all of her mistakes that she has made throughout the course of the game, she's willing to overcome her own grief, her own doubts, her own insecurities, and cement herself in the reality of the situation.
Hey Mom, I made you a charm bracelet for good luck. I made a matching one for me, so bring me back something cool from Washington.
Stop blaming yourself, Anderson. A knife in the arm is just part of the job. If you're gonna keep fussing, you can get the hell out. But leave the whiskey.
I am honored by this award. Thank you. While our agency must continue to improve, the work we do here, protecting communities, pursuing the truth, it's the most important work there is.
Anderson, look, after Miranda left, it was, well, I was in a bad place. You dragging me to those dinners at your house with your family, it really, meant a lot. Thank you.
Not only does this moment confirm that she is one of the greatest characters in the Remedy connected universe, but it shows how we all deal with grief. The best ways to tackle it, inch by inch, by surrounding us with the memories of those we've been there for and those who have been there for us. It's a great point in the story because you even look at Alan's case, where so many people have wanted to help him for years and years.
I don't have time for this, so let's get it over with. Tell me, was this all fake? A show?
No one said otherwise, Mr. Wake. It was to indulge you, but we can stop pretending now.
Masks come off.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far. I don't even think you know who's under your mask, but you know how to make things difficult for yourself. All these rules, endless, convoluted loops you insist on going through. You are so lucky, you know. There are so many people helping you. Armies of people. Myself. Your wife.
Alice. I need to get to her. She's in danger.
She is. Because of you. And so is someone important to me, someone you pulled into this. You keep opening doors. Peeking in. Reaching through to get what you want, and that puts you in my path.
I don't know what you're talking about. I have to go now.
Maybe you will make it through this time. This has gone on long enough. This and our Night Springs, it was a nice distraction.
It's time someone gave me a straight answer here.
The next time we meet, the circumstances will be very different. And you would do well to return the favor by playing your part. Or stay out of my way, Mr. Wake.
Whatever you say.
When the moments are the toughest, being there for one another, which is a central idea that this game does elevate in the second half of the story. I mean, you even have the dual protagonist setup where both of these characters are influencing each other's stories in numerous amounts of ways that are mind-boggling even on a second or third playthrough. And for 99% of the runtime, they never really even see each other in the same room. They only have, realistically, if you discount the overlaps, they only spend about a few minutes together. It may be heavy, it may be a little over the top, but that idea for being there for one another, just like in Death Stranding, is poetic and, hell, I love it. Referring back to our previous conversation with Alice, you saw at the end of the game how far she was willing to take herself to go back and save Alan. Recount all the instances where people are there for one another. As dark and mysterious as the story for Alan Wake 2 is, the biggest reality this game conveys is the idea that we should always be there for one another. of the most powerful moments in the game in my mind comes from Alan at the end, where he's going back to get the car from Cauldron Lake, where Saga is officially thrown into the lake herself. Alan is on this beeline from point A to point B. It feels like the very first time, where we're not just in an open environment trying to piece together storylines and trying to make sense of all of this insanity. We have a guided direction, which is only fueled by one of the most powerful scenes in the game that I'll play here.
If Scratch had brought the dark place here, this would take me back inside. In 2010, I dived in, a leap of faith for Alice, with no idea that the cost would be a nightmare worse than death. It had taken me 13 years to get out. Now Alice was dead, because of me. And I was gonna make that leap again, this time knowing the cost all too well. Another way to look at it, I had brought the dark place here with me. I never had gotten out. Maybe after this I finally could. It was a fool's hope. I had no choice. I had to do it. That didn't make me any less terrified. Fuck it.
The streets of New York speak back to you in ways that don't seem immediate at first. The forests have echoes of screams and cries and tension and the whistling winds that makes you uncertain of what's to come next. Even from the comments made directly to us by others, this narrative reminds us of all the hardships of overcoming a downward spiral that, to a degree, is one's own creation. There's a somber sense of calm in between the shades we encounter on the way. New York has this eerie beauty to it, with the rain slowly building up over the course of the adventure, with the lights and the fog and all of the pages scattered throughout the environment, all of these loose ideas that we can harness to survive. While Bright Falls and Watery contrast the highs and lows of creation, of what was and what can be. Whether or not these lines should cross is up to the viewer to decide. We all live in a central reality where various pieces of fiction will bite off stories that are our story. It kind of breaks me to that moment where Saga meets the Andersons for the very first time.
Help me! I don't feel like myself. Don't know how to fight it. We're too old now.
Excuse me. I'm looking for the Anderson trailer.
What? Sweetie pie, right on time. Like we were just saying, it's not true. The lies to hurt you and make you weak. Don't believe a word. They believe because deep down, they want to be told what to think. We're different. Rebels! You must stop it before it turns real. Don't be part of the story. Make the story.
All parts of the family narrative aside, this is a beautiful line that really hammers home the central theme of Alan Wake 2. This all adds up to prevent the game from falling victim to the curse of, say, what the later Silent Hill titles fell into. Alan Wake 2 is a horror title we will conversate about for years to come, and shockingly sits as one of the greatest ones I've ever played, in spite of my fanboyism. This game tackles such psychological struggles like depression, PTSD, suicide, socio-identity disorder, and much more in a manner that feels respectful for anyone who has dealt with any of these in their life, or has experienced grief with any person that they've loved. Just like the art Zane Wake, and even the old gods aim to make, this title allows these struggles to guide and enhance the growth of both of our protagonists in a way that feels earned. Not as a cop-out response to a story that wants a psychological twist at the end for the sake of it. Every gameplay-oriented aspect of this title, from the ways you combat enemies, writing stories, and investigating echoes, all loop and spiral back into a central theme of overcoming traumatic experiences, not alone, but together. You root for everyone involved in this story, and the world feels more real because of it. Those radio shows with Pat Maine as he slowly falls into the loop of Alzheimer's, Saga trying to reunite with her family that she knew she had before the story started tearing it apart, Alan finally coming to terms with his fear of fiction, being able to take a stand, look all this uncertainty in the eye, and accept the world for what it is, and what he can make it if he does the right thing. This does not feel like a story injected with artificial symbolism. It acts like a living, breathing narrative that grows over time alongside each of the characters present to eventually take on these horrors head on. This isn't the end-all discussion on such psychological ideals, but a fitting continuation of what to do next to overcome them. Now that is gaming with a purpose.
In